Good evening from New York. I'm Chris Hayes. Just one day after the top aide to the Director of National Intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, resigned in very public protest of the U.S.-Israel war on Iran, Gabbard herself was hauled before Congress today to try and justify the unjustifiable. And she is something of an odd messenger on this war with Iran, considering that for years, her entire political identity, one might even say her marketing brand, was in opposition to it.
Where is the conversation about peace? Every time we launch these interventionist regime change wars, it is not only our veterans who pay the price for that. Every single one of us pays the price. We have spent trillions of your taxpayer dollars to pay for these wars, taking those dollars away from our communities and our people who need them right here at home.
That was back in 2019 when Gabbard, a former combat veteran and congresswoman from Hawaii, was running for president as a Democrat. And if that wasn't on the nose enough for you, her official campaign merch included this T-shirt featuring the slogan, "No War with Iran." Well, a lot can change in 7 years. Gabbard is, of course, now the Director of National Intelligence for Donald Trump. But despite having one of the highest-ranking jobs in the intelligence community, arguably the highest ranking, by many accounts, she's been effectively shut out of its actual workings. Instead of coordinating with the various three-letter agencies, the CIA, FBI, NSA, and on and on, which is what Congress intended when they established that position after 9/11, Gabbard has basically been sent down conspiracy theory rabbit holes befitting a third-rate right-wing podcaster, like the raid that she oversaw earlier this year on a Fulton County, Georgia election office as part of Donald Trump's obsession on the big lie of the stolen 2020 election. There she is, Director of National Intelligence at a domestic election office. Today, Gabbard appeared before the Senate Intelligence Committee, and much of the substance was about the Trump administration's lie that this war was necessary because Iran's nuclear program posed an imminent threat to the United States, which comes a day after her counterterrorism chief, that man, Joe Kent, a combat veteran and, well, right-wing crank, a guy who presumably had access to all this very high-level intelligence, publicly resigned over the war, saying that Iran does not pose an imminent threat to the United States.
So imminent threat, you're saying that there was no intelligence that you saw with the highest level clearance, obviously involved in this conversation, that showed an imminent threat from Iran to the United States?
No, unless we took certain actions, unless we came after them in a way that they thought threatened the regime, then we basically knew what they were going to do.
Well, okay, but then, right, of course,
right, but like any country. So if you attack any country, we know that they're going to have a reaction.
We face an imminent threat once we attack you.
Fantastic. Yeah, exactly. But there was no intelligence that said, "Hey, on whatever day it was, March 1st, the Iranians are going to launch this big sneak attack."
Now, given those individuals, grain of salt, right? Viewed through appropriate skepticism. But basically that checks out with all the reporting we have, right? And with the public record. Now, in her public response to Kent's resignation, Gabbard didn't even try to rebut it, right? So, because I don't think it's rebuttable. I think what he's saying is plainly true. She did her best to split hairs and to keep the boss happy. So this was her response, quote, "As our commander-in-chief, Donald Trump is responsible for determining what is and is not an imminent threat. After carefully reviewing all the information before him, President Trump concluded that the terrorist Islamist regime in Iran posed an imminent threat, and he took action based on that conclusion." In other words, the facts don't matter. Reality is kind of subjective, or it's bent by the will of the king. Forget all the actual intelligence, the conclusions of the massive intelligence community we have. The truth is whatever Donald Trump says it is. Well, today, Senator Jon Ossoff of Georgia grilled Gabbard on precisely that logic.
Was it the assessment of the intelligence community that there was an imminent nuclear threat posed by the Iranian regime?
The intelligence community assessed that Iran maintained the intention to rebuild and to continue to grow their nuclear enrichment capability.
Was it the assessment of the intelligence community that there was a, quote, imminent nuclear threat posed by the Iranian regime, yes or no?
Senator, the only person who can determine what is and is not an imminent threat is the president.
False. This is the worldwide threats hearing where you present to Congress national intelligence timely, objective, and independent of political considerations.
It is not the intelligence community's responsibility to determine what is and is not an imminent threat.
You notice in that exchange, all the work that the intention is doing, like they had an intention. You know, I've got an intention to someday dunk a basketball, for what it's worth. Director of National Intelligence says it's not the intelligence community's responsibility to determine what qualifies as an imminent threat to our country. That's a very strange thing to say. What exactly are we doing with the tens of billions of dollars we're shoveling into the intelligence agencies? Her stance on the threat Iran poses is not exactly clear because, as is customary, Gabbard's opening statement was released publicly ahead of her testimony. And when she delivered it, got very interesting. Here's what happened. Democratic Senator Mark Warner of Virginia noticed one specific section that was missing.
I guess what I'm concerned about, one thing is, even in your printed testimony today on page 6, and your last paragraph on page 6, as a result of Operation Midnight Hammer, Iran's nuclear enrichment program was obliterated. There's been no efforts to try to rebuild their enrichment capability. You omitted that paragraph from your oral opening. Was that because the president had said there was an imminent threat 2 weeks?
No, sir. I recognize that the time was running long, and I skipped through some of the portions.
So you chose to take
my oral delivered remarks.
You chose to omit the parts that contradict the president.
I want to repeat that because Warner went through it quickly. So I'm going to quote from Gabbard's prepared remarks, right, that were given to the committee. As a result of Operation Midnight Hammer, Iran's nuclear enrichment program was obliterated. There has been no efforts since then to try to rebuild their enrichment capability. In other words, there was no imminent threat from Iran. They did not have an active nuclear weapons program. Right there in black and white, still available on the Senate Intelligence Committee website, written and prepared by the chief intelligence official in the United States government appointed by Donald Trump. Now, Gabbard says she just ran out of time to get to that part. Just for those few sentences, just that had to go. Really? This is all part of the balancing act that these Trump officials have to perform publicly. It's humiliating, obviously, that's sort of the point. The congressional hearings are for an audience of one, as everything is. And Lord knows, it's not even clear that Donald Trump ever gets a daily briefing. That came up in the hearing, too. Like, I don't know where he gets intelligence. This might be his best chance to actually hear it, if you admit it. And so Tulsi tied herself into knots to avoid contradicting Donald Trump, but she has no problem ignoring her entire past political identity built on no war with Iran. None of that, though, her performance, the omissions, none of it changes the reality, which is still there, staring us in the face. This is a war of choice. It was launched against a country that posed no imminent threat to us. It has already been enormously costly. 13 U.S. service members have lost their lives. Officials report about 1,400 people have been killed in Iran. Last week, the United Nations said more than 3 million people were displaced there, number even likely higher now. Almost 1,000 people have been killed and over 1 million displaced just in the small nation of Lebanon, where Israel says it's targeting Hezbollah. But that offensive has resulted in widespread destruction in dense urban environments. 15 people have died inside Israel itself. And about 100 others at least have died in the surrounding Gulf states. Domestically, the Washington Post is reporting the Pentagon wants in, get this, wait for it, additional $200 billion from Congress to fund the war. Just today, Israel struck a major gas field in Iran. According to a report in Axios, the Trump administration knew about the attack. Iran responded by attacking a Saudi oil refinery with a ballistic missile. It also hit Qatar's largest liquefied natural gas facility. Gas prices are already on the rise as the Strait of Hormuz remains closed to non-Iranian ships. They're likely to go even higher. Although today, a little bit of good news, Vice President J.D. Vance, who's been unusually quiet since this war began, was shipped out to Michigan to tell voters it could be worse.
As much as we got to focus on getting these gas prices down, the reality is overseas they're feeling it far worse than we did because we've taken the steps to protect our energy economy.